Hi, everybody. Feeling really charged today. I'm in the process of moving or, packing my belongings and getting ready to move up north to Washington. So if you see my fundraiser on my page, please share it. We need all the help we can get and would just love to receive support from the community, obviously. Okay, so I really want to talk about this today. I have been in the field of mind control and satanic ritual abuse and MK Ultra and things of that nature for many, many years, doing a lot of research and also being a part of it myself in my past and as a child. So I have a deep level of understanding of mind control and how it works and how it's rampant in our society as a societal collective, but also as a personal experience. So I wanted to speak to that today because I have deep, deep, deep levels of compassion for and welcome whoever's here. I have deep levels of compassion for those who I have witnessed in my experience being turned, if you will, or taken over or compromised in some way. And so I feel really compelled to speak to this because it feels like something that we're all grappling with, but we're not talking about. And I tend to shy away from talking about super controversial issues like this. And at the same time, I'm just bursting, right? So I'm at this point where I feel like because of the current events in our world and like what's happening in our reality, I feel like it's actually necessary to speak to this. I have co-facilitated retreats with people that have turned. I have been involved with people who were once, spiritual prophets and were, leaders in the new age community that have turned. And they've turned against me. And I've had many situations where I've had to dismantle the mind control and the influence of these people and these false prophets from the interdimensional energies that were influencing them on the collective of the people that we were working with. So for me, it all started in 2010 when I started doing retreats. And my very first retreat, I had this experience where the person that I was co-facilitating with decided to turn the entire group against me, like 30 people. And I was literally singled out and by myself as a leader of this retreat, trying to figure out how to navigate this experience and be able to counteract what was going on, because I could see clearly that there was an interdimensional energy that had taken over this person and was psychically controlling and influencing and had hooked into me and was trying to harvest my energy and the energy of the collective of people within this retreat. And fortunately for me, there were a few people that, had their senses and knew that it wasn't me and knew that it wasn't what was being presented and what was being reflected upon them. And so from that point forward, though, so I got out of that situation remotely intact, not completely, but it was like an attack on my person, and on my integrity, when in fact I had done nothing. And it was because I was having a positive influence on this group of people, right? So, and then of course I was being used by this person to get to those people. So it was like this whole backwards sort of mind control situation where I was like, okay, what's going on here? Like, and I was at that point, I wasn't very keen on the idiosyncrasies of interdimensional beings and how they operate and function. And this was sort of my first major, well, I can't say that, but it was being in a position of leadership in that moment in 2010. It gave me the opportunity to see what could happen and what was happening to me. So throughout the next 3 years, literally, I proceeded to dismantle the mind control and the hooks that this interdimensional being had placed upon these people, these 30 people. It took me a while, but it really taught me so much about how these beings work and how they influence and control others. And it gave me an opportunity to really understand the deeper levels of this. And then I came across that person again 3 years later and saw that this person was a con man. He was very much a user of people, and he literally was harvesting energy wherever he could get it. And what was the most interesting thing is that he didn't actually recognize me or see me or know who I was after we had co-facilitated a retreat together. And that gave me another sort of clue as to the fact that this person was being utilized and harvested of their own energy and their power, and they were energy harvesting through this person. And this person, so a person has to be in pretty full agreement, not totally, some people can be unconscious to it, but you know, during that 3-year period, I realized that I was actually being influenced as well. And it was through this person showing me how I was disconnected from the earth and from my heart. And that, you know, but this person was attacking me and calling me an ugly fuck and saying all these horrible things to me. And then also trying to harvest my energy, right? And my light. So I got a deep lesson in this in 2010. And I was living in Mount Shasta at the time, which is a spiritual sort of community and an eighth wonder of the world and a spiritual place where, you know, fifth dimensional energies exist. And there's a, you know, portal and a vortex there and a living crystal and all of these things. And I was living at the base of this mountain, and I got to experience all the different levels of that, seeing interdimensional beings, sitting in council in the Temple of Telos in Mount Shasta, and really understanding, you know, all the different levels of reality, multidimensional levels of reality that are available to us. So I got to get a pretty deep dose of it. And it was important for me to have that education, because what then started to happen after that, as I began to step into more of a leadership role, and I had my own illusions about, you know, the Magdalene, and I had all these things around my ego that I needed to break down so that I wouldn't become a false prophet. And people were starting to put me in that position of, you know, elevating me. And I was like, I'm going to fall off that pedestal so quick. Like, I'm human, you know, like I can't be holier than thou and above everyone else. But my ego and these energies were trying to convince me that I was somehow a spiritual authority. And so that was a really tough process for me to dismantle that level of interdimensional influence and mind control upon my person. And so it really helped me open up to different aspects of this, to understand what was really going on. And so I started to study mind control, and I started to look at all the ways that we are being influenced in our society. And then through that process, I started to wake up to my own levels of mind control, what I had been through and what I had experienced. And knowing my past, I didn't know my past. I didn't actually have proper memories. I had false memories. I had screen memories. I had all these memories that were placed Yeah, very scary shit, Colleen. Absolutely. I woke up in 2013 and my life literally did not look the same. A veil was lifted and some information came back to me, and I discovered that I had been, you know, utilized as a child in many ways, through ritual abuse and through some really scary shit that happened to me. And so I went from being in this position of spiritual retreat facilitator, being peaceful and love and joy and light and woo, everything's amazing, to, oh my fucking God, my life is not what I thought it was, and having to completely and utterly shift my consciousness to survive. And I'm not even kidding when I say to survive, in that it then I became targeted on a deeper level than I already was being monitored and watched. But then I became targeted, and I lost my house, I lost my friends, I lost a lot of things during that year. And this was just after I'd done the 2012 winter solstice retreat in Kauai and activated this portal, the Stargate portal, and like done all this work. And then I went into, like, I was bedridden for almost the entire year of 2013. And I was sick. They were trying to host me. All kinds of stuff was happening. I was being chased in my dreams. I was being thrown around. I mean, I was literally under attack, like full force. And then in 2014, a year later, after I got out of where I was and moved and was living on the land and camping, because Kelly, and I'm actually talking about interdimensional beings more so than necessarily extraterrestrial. A lot of people confuse interdimensional forces with extraterrestrial, and there's many things that happen on that level. So just to answer that question, I'm going to continue with my story though, because I feel like it's super important to get this information out. So in 2014, I realized, actually in 2013, I discovered an aspect of my life that I was not aware of. And literally all my memories that I had in my front consciousness, a lot of them, when I would look back at my life, were actually lies. There were false screen memories that had been placed there. So the capacity at which this happens in our reality is quite profound. And this has been going on for thousands of years, back to, I can say back to the Roman era, where I believe the Roman soldiers and the ruling population of Rome were actually influenced by a group of interdimensional energies and began the process of taking over our society and creating a what's the word I'm looking for? Creating a system that would, in fact, what's the word I'm looking for? That would, in fact, bring everything into their favor, right? So this has been going on for thousands of years, and we are just now waking up to it. I mean, a lot of us have already been awake to this level of mind control and how it works, but through the Christian church, the church and state, they created the situation where they were steering the population to think in a very specific way. And, excuse me, in ancient Greece, not that it was a matriarchal culture, but the Pythia, the Delphi oracle, the oracle at Delphi, which was going on for hundreds and hundreds of years, was the main advisor. She was the main person that they would go to for advice, for information about politics and happenings in ancient Greece and in the world back then, and in ancient world. And she would give information to the powers that be, right? So she would speak truth to power. She would always honor her truth and what she was being given, rather than whatever they wanted. they couldn't necessarily steer her from her guidance and what she was being given, because she was getting it direct from source, right? And at the time they called, you know, Apollo, you know, they said it was coming from Apollo, so still putting it into a patriarchal sort of format. However, Athena and Apollo being brother and sister, and Artemis, they all lived at this very specific time, and they all went through very specific experiences that are still living today within the collective of humanity, and also within the collective of Greece. When I was visiting there, I actually re-experienced some of these things that had happened to Athena, and I think it was basically so that I could clear the energetic imprint of it upon the collective of humanity and upon the earth. And so I've been doing this work for, you know, since 2009. I've been in a position of stepping into my role as someone who is here to facilitate and hold space for humanity on this level. And so with that, it's important for us to think about when the population is being steered through media specifically, or through someone who rises into a position of power, that to me is mind control. So, and the purpose of that is energy harvesting. So service to self beings, interdimensional beings that are service to self beings who are not connected to their own source light energy, have to harvest their energy horizontal. I call, this is my signature statement, horizontal harvesting. So they have to seek outside of themselves to harvest energy in order to function and survive. And so what that does, though, is that service to others beings who have their own source light energy and have a potency of light available to them will be the ones that are targeted and the energy that is harvested. And there are very specific souls called Sophia souls that have come here with a mission, the Sophionic mission, to clear the bloodlines backwards and forwards of these influences, these darker influences, to clear them out so that they can no longer influence humanity. So there are those of us who are Sophia souls that are doing this work, and I call that the Sophionic mission. And so those of us that are service to other beings, we attempt to harvest our energy from source. So we are in our vertical alignment, right? And that's also one of mine. So having said all that, the false prophets that I've experienced, there have been many. There's been so many. But personally, I've literally personally experienced false prophets now since 2009 for 10 years. So I've had a deep level of experience with who these people are, how they operate, and who the interdimensional beings are that have taken over, or they have been hosted by these people, right? And these people may be unconscious to what's happening. They may not even realize that this is happening to them. I didn't realize it was happening to me. And thank goodness that I had somebody, like, you know, smack me in the head and be like, yo, sister, like, no, this is not, you know, you need to ground with Gaia, with the earth. Like, you need to get with mama here. You're disconnected. And although I was very connected, I was still disconnected on some level, and my energy was being utilized, and it was being utilized to harvest energy from others. And it was very small and slight, but it was enough for someone else to recognize it and be like, hey, this is what's going on with you. Let's shift that. So what ended up happening is, energetically, I removed all of those hooks and those attachments that were attempting to utilize my light and my life force energy to harvest the energy of others. And then through that process, I was humbled, and I realized that I had been in a state of egoic elitism, spiritual elitism, even though I didn't even realize that that was what was going on with me. But it took me a while to really understand the levels of that and how it was playing itself out. I was like on my way up to being a spiritual leader, right? And before I even got there, I had this experience and I was able to dismantle that and then to go about it in a service to others way rather than a service to self way, and be like harvest other people's energies. So then I was able to unhook myself from all these negative energies and be able to then come back into my own source light energy, and to be able to be in my vertical alignment and you know, take my energy from source, from my own source light energy, rather than harvesting from others outside of me, and then obviously influencing people in a more positive way rather than taking their energy from them. I was giving back to them. But in that process also, what happened to me is I started to get vampired. I started to get my energy harvested from other people, and people started taking my energy from me and sucking my life force. And so boundaries, sovereignty, you know, like all these things started happening to me, and I had to find a way to ground. And so I wasn't grounded when this started happening to me. I just like, basically I was like, woo, floundering around and like, you know, trying to find my footing so that I could be in the world. And I was having a really hard time staying grounded in the practical reality of life, because one, I was on this high, like, woo, frequency, and love the purple robe. Thanks, babe. I mean, whatever. Anyway, it's kind of funny. I'm hot, but I'm just like, I look terrible. But anyway, so the essence of what happened to me is, one, I was in this spiritual elitism, and I was, interdimensional beings were utilizing my energy to harvest other people's energy and to hook into other people's energy. And then once that was cleared and I grounded with Gaia and I grounded with the earth and I understood what was going on, then it was like I was grounded, but I was still unhinged because I didn't have the tools yet to understand how to establish certain boundaries for my own sovereignty, right? To my own personhood, to cultivate my own energy, to understand what that meant and how to counteract these energies outside of me that I thought were me, right? Because for a long time, I thought all those energies were me, all these thought forms, like all this stuff that was happening. And then I had this experience in Shasta where it was so interesting. So at one point, I woke and it was like this disconnect. So I got this like message basically from another person in Shasta that I needed to energetically divorce my father. And the reason for that was because he was the main hook-in handler that I had. And I was receiving a monthly stipend from him. It wasn't like a couple $100, but it was like, it was keeping me in lack and limitation consciousness. It was keeping me hooked into that system, right? And hooked into the mind control and the control that he and those other energies had influencing my reality, right? So no matter what I would have been doing, I would have been influenced by those energies, right? So whether it was good or whether it was completely, you know, not good, it wouldn't matter because I was being harvested and that I was being used as a tool for them. So for me, when I decided to make that decision and to be like, okay, I'm disconnecting from this, I had to say, hey, you know, I don't want your money anymore. Hey, I need to take a break. Like, I need some space. And he cried, and like there was this whole thing that happened. And then within 24 hours, I had this huge, I think it was my right side actually. I woke up the next morning, literally, and this, hi Kathleen. I woke up the next morning and I had this huge black mass and this headache, and I was blind. I couldn't see. And I tried everything, and I was like saging, and I was like, oh my God, what am I doing? Ah! And I went under like immediate attack. And so they were like, oh shit, we're losing her, right? And she's one of our vessels that is harvesting energy from others and being a false prophet. And we have her under mind control. We can't lose her. What are we going to do, right? So what ended up happening was my friend from across the country, by 2:00 in the afternoon, she was calling me and saying, what's going on with you? Like, are you okay? Like, what's happening? And I was like, yeah, well, I was gonna call you, but I was trying to, handle it by myself, And she's like, oh my God, okay. And so we went to work clearing this black, deep, heavy thing that was blinding me, right? And we cleared it out of my space. And then I went under attack, full force. All of a sudden, there were men screaming at me on the street. My landlord at the base of the building, I was in the attic and he was in the basement, and it was like he was playing this like acid metal music in the middle of the night, and like the other people in the middle weren't there. They were out of town, right? So it was like me and him, and it was this whole thing. And then I decided, okay, and my friend came to visit, and so we went and couch surfed, okay? And then while we were couch surfing, I said to him, oh, so a cop, so he had his van parked, right? Perfectly clean van, everything was normal. And we got in it in the morning, we were going to get some coffee or something, and this ex-police officer from Los Angeles, who is now the chief of police in Mount Shasta, pulled up behind the van and walked up to us, and he started like questioning us, and he had his cell phone, and he was like, yeah, I'm just checking, somebody reported this van. We hadn't even been there. They were like, we reported the van for a couple of days, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, yeah, no, we've only been here for like one night and we're legally parked. So what are you talking about? And I was like, hi, how are you? I used to live in Los Angeles. He's like, yeah, like, I know. And I was like, So then he made a phone call, and then he tried to like find something on this guy that I was with, my friend, and my friend was sober, and he kept asking about a script card and like all this stuff, trying to find something to give us as an excuse as to why he came up to us, right? And I just kept being kind and friendly and talking to him and acting like he was just a normal, friendly cop. And so then we went back inside and decided, okay, we're obviously compromised. And I said, let me test this theory, right? Let me test this theory. Let me see, because there was another observation that I made, and that is that they are always measuring the energy fields. They're always measuring the level of energy that is output that's happening. And if anything spikes that energy, they'll fly over with the black ops, or they'll investigate. So I said to my friend, I was like, I'm going to test this theory, because nobody knew where I was. I was couch surfing in Shasta, and I lived in Dunsmuir, but I was couch surfing, and like I was totally cloaked, and nobody knew where I was, but obviously they were following me, so they knew where I was. So then I was like, okay, so this is interdimensional. It's not just physical, right? So I decided to, and this is kind of funny. I just really have to tell this story because I have so many stories to tell and I don't tell them. And I just feel like I want to tell this story. So I go back inside and I said, I'm going to cast a golden sphere of light around this building and I want to see what happens. You watch. I said, you watch. I say within 20 minutes, there will be black ops or military helicopters that fly overhead. Within 10 minutes, literally within 10 minutes, there were 7 military helicopters that flew directly over the house in South Mount Shasta, in the city itself, where, it's kind of a no-fly zone. People don't fly over the center of Shasta. It's like not something you do. It wasn't in a flight path is what I'm trying to say. And then about 5 minutes after that, 2 Black Ops Apache helicopters flew directly overhead, okay? This is when I decided and learned about the blending cloak and how to do it. So I was like, okay, so this obviously happened. There was a reaction in the field. What can I do Spirit, show me what I can do to alleviate this, because obviously the golden sphere of light is very bright and it attracts attention and it's like bugs to the light bulb. So what can I do to blend in and be able to still navigate my light and be able to source my own energy and to be able to shine brightly, but then also have sort of a blending cloak and something that works to establish my own energy body and my own field. And that's when I was shown the rainbow sphere of light. Okay. And the rainbow sphere of light is like a blending cloak that goes around your soul matrix, your energy matrix. And so what I discovered is that when we blast off, because they're measuring the energy fields, they're always monitoring what's going on, always, right? So back to the story of me and the situation. So by the second day, I was losing my mind. I thought I was mental. I thought it was me. I thought I was mentally ill, that something was wrong with me, right? Because I was hearing all these voices and this weird shit was happening. By the third day, I was couch surfing somewhere else for 2 days. Then when I got back to my house, there was a note on the door that said, "You're not welcome here." My rent was paid. There was no reason for any of this. I hadn't made any noise. I was living in an attic room. I mean, it was just, there was no reason for me to be told that I wasn't welcome. And this was all happening while my friends who lived in the middle portion were out of town. So I had no recourse. I didn't have them to back me up. I had nobody. So I had to leave. And come to find out later, this person was attracted to me that lived in the bottom floor and all of that. And he was the landlord. And so, of course, because he couldn't get what he wanted, that was part of it too. But even beyond that, it was the interdimensional beings that were making themselves known to me. So what I proceeded to observe in this experience was all of a sudden I had all this goodness coming towards me after I disconnected and did that energetic divorce from my handler, my father. And then I had all this negative stuff happening at the same time, right? I had this happening at the same time. So I was like, wait, okay, hold on a minute. And so something else happened, and I literally burst out laughing and was like, you guys really think that's going to work? Like, really, guys? It occurred to me that, like, I wasn't necessarily being handled by humans. It was more like interdimensional energies that were trying to control what was happening so that I couldn't break free of this locked in system that I was in and that I had been in my whole life. And at that point, I was 42 years old. Okay, 42 years old. So that's 8 years ago now. And wait, yeah. No, actually it was 9 years ago. I was 41. So shortly thereafter, once I broke free of this, all of a sudden my abundance just like popped through. And like all of a sudden I had this boon of just amazingness happen in my life and this flooding of beautiful energy come in. And I moved into this beautiful home, which then I created the Goddess Temple of Mount Shasta. And then I proceeded to have events and all this stuff started happening. These really good things started happening for me. And the house that I created it as a temple. So I had the strength and the support of, you know, divine feminine energy with me in this establishment of this place. And so it really made a difference in the protection levels that I had, because then I realized I need to protect my house. I need to like put up a shield. I need to create an encasement for myself that allows, you know, abundance and beautiful energy to come in, but it also keeps out the negative riffraff and the interdimensional energies. And fortunately for me, this was a place that only one other person had lived in for 10 months. And so it was an opportunity because there wasn't a lot of other people's energies there. It was easy to clear and it was pretty neutral. And I think that that makes a huge difference in our own lives, in our environments, and like the houses we live in and the places that we live. If there's portals open and there's a way, an avenue for those energies to come in, right? So all of this then goes back though to mind control, because if you think about it, our thought forms, they're actually outside of us. They're not actually an internal reality of like, right now, for example, I'm speaking, right? So I'm speaking from my own consciousness, okay? But a thought form can come from anywhere. So if we're not being discerning and we're not paying attention to where those thought forms are coming, or where the influence, verbal influence is coming from, or who we're listening to, or what we're paying attention to, what we're receiving in our field, then there's opportunities for information to come from anywhere, right? So if we're not discerning our thought forms and looking at like, okay, what is this? What is that? Is that mine? Is that my original thought form? Like, where's that coming from? Who am I listening to? What's going on? Then we can be influenced by all kinds of information, right? And we can be steered in a very specific direction, right? So how do we go about taking care of ourselves and being in discernment and being sovereign within our own energy field and sourcing from our own source light energy through vertical alignment, as opposed to horizontal harvesting and seeking outside of ourselves for answers that we have within ourselves? So the way that I have created discernment for myself is I check in, and I used to be super vigilant about every single thought form that was coming through my mind, because I wanted to make sure that it was my original thought form and not the thought form of somebody else in my environment, or from the collective consciousness fields, or from, you know, steering of society, churches, family, you know, thought forms and belief systems. You know, all of these things really do influence our realities, right? And if we're not paying attention and we're not giving ourselves the opportunity to listen to our own inner voice, then we're shooting ourselves in the foot, in my opinion. So I have come into this place where I sit and I observe, and I stay neutral and I stay in my center, and then I observe what's going on around me, and I sort of make assessments and discernment as to what I choose to absorb and what I choose to observe and pay attention to, and also what I decide I want to believe or not believe, right? And most of the things that I believe are based on my own experience, not based on something I read in a book, or based on anything that I've seen in a video or read in an article. Like most everything that I believe and is my core essence has come from me and my own experience now. So I listen to that first. I listen to my sovereign beingness. I listen to what I am being guided to do, and I discern what's coming in too, because I don't want to put myself in a position where I'm listening to something that's not actually authentic to me. And so I've become very aware and clear of what is mine and what is not mine, right? And that has made a huge difference in my life on so many levels. It's allowed me to ground into the world and actually make like a difference and manifest in a way that I wasn't able to before, when I was ungrounded and I was like, woo, you know, all of these things, all these influences. And I wasn't listening to me. I wasn't listening to my mind and like what I was saying and what I was thinking. And because I used to identify my own thought forms with those thought forms that were being presented to me and influencing me from an interdimensional energy. So I'm not willing for that to happen anymore. I'm not willing for that to come into my field. And so I'm paying attention always to where this information is coming from. However, when I make posts on Facebook, sometimes I don't always agree with what I'm posting, and merely I am putting it out as information to be addressed and pondered. So that's my stance. That's where I come from. Like, hey, here's a piece of information. I don't necessarily believe or side with any particular viewpoint or anything like that. I'm actually in a neutral space where I'm choosing to look at something and observe from an observational standpoint rather than, oh, this is the way that it is, right? And yes, I have my opinions, absolutely. But my opinions are based on my experience. They're not based on discernment rather than just whatever somebody else is saying, you know? And if it resonates with me, I check in. If it resonates with me, then I speak to it and I hold it as truth, maybe not my own truth, but I hold it as something that I'm resonating with. But I don't necessarily resonate with everything that I'm posting. I'm merely presenting information. Is there a question that you suggest we pose ourselves or inner voice to help us discern what is or isn't ours? Okay, so what I do is I sort of like stop and I like hold my heart because I want to check into my heart's intelligence, right? I want to be with my heart. I want to be with my heart-based intelligence because my mind and my heart are now merged, right? My consciousness, my linear consciousness and my heart-centered intelligence are merged, right? So that's one thing, is bringing those two together and finding the balance there between those two so that there's, critical thinking and discernment and a heart-centered intelligence coming from a space of love, right? So actually the heart-centered intelligence for me is where my discernment lies. So I check in with my heart. So I'll place my hand over my heart and I'll just drop into my center. And there's a lot of questions you can ask yourself, like, is it true? Is it kind? Is it necessary? And a big one for me is it necessary? Is it necessary for me to speak to this? Is it necessary for me to even invest my energy in this? Is it necessary for me to be triggered by this? What is necessary about this? Do I even need to put my energy here? Like, how important is it really in the grand scheme of things? And I sort of discern what feels resonant within my heart as to what I'm investing my energy into. And yes, of course, I get triggered by things. I get fired up because my dragon is like, enough of this. I want justice, like, rawr, and my lioness, she tends to roar. She wants to roar. But in reality, what I notice about that is if I am going to actually make an impact or make a difference, right? If I'm going to influence someone in a positive way, I need to be coming from a space of love and from my heart. And if my heart isn't discerning, then I'm not discerning. So my heart has to be the resonance that discerns, as opposed to my mind, because my mind can make up a lot of judgments and a lot of critical thinking and like logic and science and all of these things. But if it's not merged with my heart-centered intelligence, then I'm not able to actually make a sound mind decision, because my sound mind is my heart, right? That is what I believe is my true brain, is my heart. And through the process of evolution, quote unquote, and the influence of the patriarchy and the linear-based mind culture, what has happened is the main goal has been to disconnect us from our heart, disconnect us from our heart-centered intelligence, which in essence is the divine feminine on some level. If we were to make this masculine and this feminine, then we could say if those aren't in balance and those aren't merged, then we're leaning in one position or the other, right? And this is something I actually want to bring up, because in victim consciousness, it's sort of, a lot of people say it's the feminine being, disempowered. But what I would actually say is it's an emasculation of the masculine and a divine feminine wound that has triggered that emasculation, and then the emasculation happens, then causing the disempowered feminine, right? Which then causes the victim consciousness. And if we are, and let me repeat that because that was huge. Okay, so the mind is the masculine, the heart is the feminine, and when they're in balance and we're using both, then we're in balance with our masculine and our feminine natures, and the heart-centered intelligence can then help the critical thinking process to discern and decide what is in our full resonant yes, okay? So if we have that going for us and we're centered in our hearts, it allows us to stay grounded and to produce and to launch through our masculine, right? But if those two aren't working together, then what happens is we don't have our footing. We don't have one or the other, right? And so as a result of that, the emasculation will happen and the disempowerment of the feminine will happen. So if one of those or the other one is off kilter, then it leans us in a specific direction, and then it doesn't allow us to utilize the other aspect of our realities. So every gender, whether you're male or female, doesn't matter. We all have, there's many genders now, and we all have masculine and feminine balance within us. And that's in our hearts and our minds. So, and then there's the gut intelligence too, but I'm not going to get into that right now. But there's the deepest place for me is in my heart, right? So when the divine feminine wound gets triggered, the masculine gets emasculated, and then that disempowers the feminine within, right? And then we come from a victim consciousness or a martyr consciousness and a lack and limitation consciousness. It goes into our abundance. It goes into all these other things, rather than being empowered and in our truth, and centered and focused within the center of our beingness in our vertical alignment with source, right? So this central location, this heart-centered intelligence, is the primary embodiment of our truth, in my opinion. And so when that's off and we're not grounded, or we're run down, or we're not taking care of ourselves, these things can go awry. And then it causes and wreaks havoc in our life, and it triggers PTSD symptoms, all kinds of things that happen. And then we're more likely to be susceptible to mind control, anger, fear, lack, limitation, victim consciousness, martyrdom. So all of those things come back to what's going on right here. What am I feeling? Do I resonate with this? How do I feel about this? Actually, what's going on in my heart around this? Is this a healthy dynamic for me? Is this a healthy investment of my energy? Right? So false prophets tend to use two tactics. One, they utilize fear of losing out, fear of not being enough in the people that they're dealing with, which is an interdimensional action, right? Working through that person, to make somebody feel less than, like they don't have the answers for themselves, or like that they need this other person to be whole, right? And so that is an energy harvesting mechanism that is being used, and that's mind control. And so today I posted about a spiritual leader in the world, and my observation of what I saw take place. You can go to the post. It says disclaimer on the top. And you can read about that. But for me, I have deep levels of compassion for this woman, because 20 years ago, I was being guided to be one of her students. And intuitively, without even knowing who this woman was, I fortunately had the discernment, even back then, to say, you know what, that doesn't actually resonate with me. That doesn't feel right to me. And so I never did. I never became one of her practitioners. And I did use her cards, and I did her oracle decks. And I did have some incredibly crazy experiences around her certain things, her angel numbers books and all of those things. But I also believe that she was being utilized to harvest energetically from the population. And so she was not even aware as to the level of mind control that she was under. And so as I began to witness her aging and witnessing what was happening, I realized what was happening way before it actually happened. And I said to myself, ooh, I don't think I actually want to invest my energy there anymore. I think I want to pull my energy out of that. And I let go of all my decks of hers. I actually gave them away. And I also blessed all of them, and I shielded them. And so that they wouldn't have a negative influence on anyone that I was giving them to, because I felt that that was also necessary. And then what ended up happening is, through a series of events, she became compromised and is now in a position where she's still being utilized and harvesting energy from the population, but now she's turned to Christianity. And she has literally looks like a different person, and she doesn't look like herself at all anymore. She's not clear. Her eyes look dead. She literally doesn't look like the same person. Her hair is a different color, her haircut, everything has changed about her. And it breaks my heart because she says she doesn't have control over whether or not her cards are still being published and sold. So she actually could do something about it. We all can. But she has chosen to remain in the victim consciousness and the disempowered state and blame her handlers rather than getting herself out of it, right? And being a sovereign being and being in her truth and being in her integrity and removing, if she in fact wants to stop publishing, because she's still making money off of publishing her cards, so that to me is like, whoa, dude, so out of integrity, right? And so I'm not saying that I'm in integrity. I'm just saying this is a situation where I have deep levels of compassion for this person, because it is evidently clear that she is being controlled and that she doesn't know that she has a choice. She literally is coming from a place of victim consciousness and then trying to influence now the population to renounce all of these things that she once taught. And that's a pretty big plethora of stuff, because she did this for over 20 years. So she has a tome of spiritual information that she has presented to the population. It's not like a few things. It's like a tome, Tome. And so for me, it's like, whoa, danger, danger, Will Robinson, pay attention. This is not actually, we don't want to be influenced by this either, right? We want to make our own discernment and our own judgment and our own resonance field as to what feels true for us and what doesn't. So I hope I answered your question, Aaron. I don't know if you're still there, but I felt really charged about this morning and felt like it was incredibly important to speak to this. And I'm going to be actually creating a podcast. So, and in these podcasts, it's called Consensual Conversations, and we will be talking about these subjects and having consensual conversations about them, because whoever I'm talking to it will be with consent that we have these conversations, and they will be touchy subjects. They will be things that people, cool, I'm glad. They will be with people that are willing to have these conversations with me, because I feel how important they are to talk about them and how important it is to where we are in this transitional period as to how we use discernment and how we show up for ourselves and what we're willing to take into our fields and what we're not. And so I also have an online course that I'm also developing, and would an online program, I don't want to call it a program though, because it's not programming. It's a course, and it's, you know, something, it's an offering that would allow us to come into our full sovereignty and our full empowerment and our full embodiment, so that we can actually function in our fullest expression, right? And our truest divine expression, and be able to utilize that to help others. So that is my intention. And so with this course, it's pretty powerful, obviously. Other people have trained with me before, and they've had really amazing results. I've never really had a negative result, which is good. So if you're interested in that, please private message me, and I'm happy to have a conversation with you about that. And I'm taking deposits for that now. And so, yeah, also I am emergency moving to Washington, and there's a fundraiser on my page. If you're interested in donating or sharing, I would really appreciate that. I do believe in the power of community and what's possible, and, you know, what we can do together. And this supports me and my son and his live stream in coming into a more positive expression of himself. So yeah, that's it for today. Signing off. Live365. What day is it? I have no idea. Oh my gosh, it's day 24. Day 24 of the year already. Oh my gosh, it's happening. Have a good day. Love you.